had that pressed, didn't I? Copy view. Let's go back to this really buggy interface. All right. All right, we're back. We are COMP123 in the summer 2019 semester, and it's lesson 9, part 3 of our broadcast. Let's just check how it's doing here. We're pretty loud compared to last time, part 3 of our broadcast. And today we're talking about wireframes, right? So if you look up online on your Lab 9, Lab 9 is, look, we've been talking about making user interface for all this time, and one of the things I'd like you to do, and it's not a programming task this time around, is create a wireframe for your user interface. Okay, so who's ever done a wireframe? Anybody done a wireframe before? How about this? Keep your hand up if you're an artist. Are you an artist? Anybody? Designer? You like art? How about if you like art? Can you put your hand up if you like art? No one likes art? Okay, there's a couple people who like art. Yay, okay. Some people like art. They're artistic, all right, whatever. Okay, but most of you are not. You're programmers. And programmers generally don't consider themselves artists. But we should all know how to use tools. So one of the things I want to get you to do is, if you please go up online. There is I put a link on eCentennial for something called Mockups, okay? Now, by the way, Mockups is not the only tool you can look up, but basically what I want you to do is make a low fidelity wireframe. Okay, let's talk about what that is. So I'm going to go here where it says create free account. Do this with me, guys. Please don't just watch me. Do it. Because today, by midnight, you have to create a wireframe. Okay, so I'm going to click on free account. It's going to take me here. It's going to ask me to log in with Google or Facebook or whatever. You can choose what you want. And if you notice this, I have a bunch of choices. So this is a free app, kind of a free preview of this app, Mockups. And I can click on blank project. That's probably a safe bet. I can click on the other ones too, but let's just start with this one. And if you notice, I have this blank area here that I can do stuff with. Yay, very exciting. So here's what I want you. Here's what a wireframe is. It's literally a low fidelity bunch of lines with primitives like this. Watch, take a primitive, a rectangle, drag and drop it on. I can also center it in my view, and I can make this 340. Oops, undo that, change. I can make this the width 340 and the height is 480, and I can center this in my view. Let's center this thing somewhere in my view. There we go. So this area here is the area that you're going to have your interface, right? So you can imagine that this is going to be the interface for your BMI app. Okay? So that's what it does. And then what you can do is, well, we know we're going to have some labels. So let's drag a label in here. And if you double click on this one, you can change from label to, let's say, height. Okay, so this is my height, and I want to make this height 20. Remember I said that all things should be mostly 20 on the screen, so there's 20 from a pixel perspective. You can change that. And let's also pull in a text box. So if you want to do that, I can say text. And if you want to say a text box, it doesn't exist, right? But an input, like text input, does exist, or input. If I put input, right, as an example, that might come off with something. So here's a text area, right? And if I just put text by itself, you can see that I have this text input. I can pull that in. And I can make that 22 as well. And I can also make it so it's much smaller. It's not going to be that big, right? It's going to probably be something like this. Because, the area for my height, it's not going to be that big, right? So height, and then the stuff that's in here you can replace, so double click, so you can say like, my height is going to be meters or inches, right? So meters or inches, you can say that. And if you want to, you can center it so that you can see meters or inches. And then I can just copy paste. I can take these two things and copy paste. And you can see now that I'm designing my app outside of Visual Studio, right? And this would be pounds and kilograms. So pounds and kg. And if it doesn't fit, you can just make it larger until it does. So you can say that, well, it's probably going to be something like this. And you can be very specific in terms of how this works, right? And start designing stuff, right? And maybe you also want to make a button. So we can type in button up here. And just drag and drop that button, my submit button in here. This will be the calculate button or whatever. I'm not going to design the whole thing for you, but this could be your, it wouldn't be calculate. You would change it to something that, so I think it's calculate BMI or something. But I'm going to call it the calculate button. Again, I can make it the right size by making it 20. And I can choose if it's rounded or not, how it looks, whatever, background. All I care about is this. And then what you want to do is you also want to go with some lines. If I can type line today, here we go. Let's make a diagonal line. Drag that in. And this diagonal line is going to point to your objects like this and say this is my height text box, right? So again, the line itself, I don't want any arrowheads, so you can turn the arrowheads off. And then you can add a label where my line is right here. It's my label. Or maybe I want to put in something else, like a background or whatever. But basically, if I double click in here, I can say that this is my height text box. This is my height text box. So we can change this line. And actually, you can make this go to back. You can, I believe you can set to back and stuff too. Arrange. Like for what this thing is, you got to consider like how powerful this thing is, right? So, I mean, to me, I'm always impressed by this kind of stuff, right? Send to back. Because at the end of the day, line. Yeah, let's move this up for a second. And you want to label all your objects in the thing. So this is what wireframing is. Wireframing has no colors. I don't want you to add colors. I don't want you to add images. I don't want you to have interactions. It's literally black, white, maybe a little bit of gray like this. That's it. Okay, why do we do this? Because we want to communicate our design to somebody else. Or somebody wants to communicate their design to you, an artist. My company says, hey, make this. Developer, go. And you're going to do it. You have no choice on what it looks like. You're going to try and make your application look exactly like this as much as possible. Is it going to be perfect? No, almost never, right? However, you're going to try and be as close as possible to your design. So for the next few minutes, what I want you to do is you can start working on your design. There's other tools that you can use, okay? If you don't want to use mockups, one thing that the problem with mockups is you have to pay for it to save, right? So what you could do is do a screen cap. Capture your screen and save it as a PNG. But the final output for today's lab is it must be a PDF. Your client, I'm the client, your client demands it's a PDF. So please take your screenshot or whatever, put it into a Word document, convert it into a PDF, do whatever you have to do. It must be a PDF. I will not accept a JPEG or PNG or bitmap or anything like that. It's got to be a PDF, the final output. Okay? So yeah, so that's the little exercise. If you don't want to use mockups, let's say for example you want something else, there's also a free kind of a Photoshop-like program called Krita. It is not a manipulation program like mockups. If I was to download it, you can download it for free for Mac, Windows, and Linux. So if I use Krita, it looks like this. Here's Krita. I can say new file, and new file you can set up width and height of the file and a resolution. Now one thing to note is that Krita is not something you can manipulate objects with. It's just a drawing program. It's like Paint on steroids, or a type of Photoshop, okay? So if I do this and I start drawing, notice that if I grab a primitive like a square or a rectangle, if I draw like this, it's going to be like massive, right? We don't want that. And we want the size to be quite small, let's say something like 1 pixel, so then you can draw that. And then one thing to note is if I go over here and try and move it around, I can't move anything because it's pixels now. You convert it to pixels. So the advantage of this is it's like Photoshop. You have a lot of control. You can paint. You have tons of layers on the right-hand side, and it's totally free. If you're going to do any kind of pixel art or art in general, Krita is a great tool, and there's lots of tutorials online. Okay. One thing that Krita will not do is do objects. Right. So unless you do something like this, then you can move things around. So I can change the size of objects like this. It's a pretty cool tool. And then again, you can kind of put another one in there and do the same thing we kind of did there. It also takes text. So here's text where I can kind of now notice on the top there's a lot of controls on the top you have to figure out when it comes to using Krita. Okay, so just be aware of this when you're using it. Okay, next, that's the next tool you can use. Okay, so Krita. One of my favorite tools to use is Adobe Illustrator. All right, so again, now this is a paid-for program. So if I go to Illustrator, here's Illustrator. I like using this because to me, this is a professional level program. It gives you a lot more choices, and a lot of pros use this one. I'm going to create new, an Illustrator. What Illustrator does, which is a little different, is it has a lot of templates. So if I want to, make a wireframe for an iPhone or an Android phone, I can choose one of these templates, and I can kind of make my wireframe alongside this thing. So let's say, for example, I don't have to worry about any of these settings. They do the kind of the width and height for me. Now I know that it's going to be an iPhone or a phone, but I want to do 320 by 480. I can certainly just do this myself and type it in and press create. And when I do that, what Illustrator does, which is different than Photoshop, is it creates something called an artboard, right? And it also deals with layers as well as various artboards. You can have multiple artboards. But again, you have ultimate control. If I take a primitive and I draw it on the screen, then I can move it around, very similar to what we saw in Krita, right? The same idea. One thing about Illustrator to learn, remember that Illustrator you can learn online with lynda.com. I highly recommend it. All of us have access to lynda.com here at the college, at Centennial College. We get free lynda.com. You also have access to lynda.com through your Toronto Public Library for free. If you have a Toronto Public Library card, lynda.com is your friend. Okay, so you could spend some time learning one application, and I recommend all developers should learn at least one application that they can do some simple drawings, because you want to be able to communicate with the artists. You want to be able to communicate with your bosses. You want to be able to communicate with your customer. If you have your own little startup, or if you're an independent developer or whatever. As an entrepreneur, you want to be able to communicate visually with someone, and it's good to know at least one tool to some degree. Okay. So again, here's Illustrator. I think it's a great tool, and again, it's very similar. You can add text and so on, and there's a lot of templates. That's the advantage of Illustrator. Okay, so that's Illustrator. Autodesk also offers an option. We talked about this before. Sketchbook. If you're a student, you can apply for a student access or educational access to Autodesk products. With Autodesk, you get Maya, you get 3D Studio Max, you get AutoCAD, and you also get Sketchbook Pro for free. And I think Sketchbook Pro, we saw it already last week when I was doing the whole thing with, when I was explaining how to do GitHub, I used Sketchbook Pro. Again, it's a very similar tool. So if I bring Sketchbook Pro up, or Sketchbook for Enterprise, it looks like this. And again, similar tools. I can kind of draw a primitive, and then from there do more and more and align things the way I want. So really cool tool. You can draw with any of these tools. Even a napkin, at the end of the day, if you draw a napkin, a lot of times we do a lot of deals in a cafe on a napkin. You know, we say, I want it like this. Or your client might come to you and say, you know what, I want my app to be kind of like this one and kind of like this one. And I want you to put those together, developer. And you're like, okay, draw it. Because you can try for him, you can try and do it, but you're not an artist, right? Obviously, the best case scenario would be your artist to go and meet with the developer, or with the client, and he's going to sketch it out for you, and you're going to tell the client if it's even possible what he's asking, okay? Because sometimes the client will want you to do things like, so can you make an AI that detects, like, you know, how much money I have in my wallet? You know, no, can't do that, right? Can you make an AI like to follow me, you know, no matter where I go, and you know, to know how much money is in my wallet at the same time and talk Greek? You know, no, I can't. No, it's not going to happen, right? Or whatever cockamamie thing they want to come up with. Follow your bliss. I want the AI to help me follow my bliss. Whatever. I'm just making this up. But what I'm saying is, you have to make it so that you have to tell the client that it's not possible. All right? The artist is going to say, developer, here's what it's going to look like. Here are the color schemes, all this kind of stuff. But you're going to tell the client if it can even be done. All right. So then we've talked about a couple of tools, and again, outside of being silly, with some of the suggestions we're making here, it's not about being an artist here. It's about sketching and communicating, right? So part of Lab 9 is all about creating a sketch that is labeled low fidelity, just wireframes, just basically lines and primitive shapes to describe what your interface is going to look like for assignment 4. That's what's due tonight at midnight, okay? I'm going to give you a few minutes to sketch it out. Right now it's 4:55. I'm going to give you an additional 10 minutes to sketch this out as much as possible. Then I'm going to get to the programming side, all right? So I'm going to stop recording at this point.